Welcome to Healing Your Family Legacy, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 94, Resiliency Through the Holidays, Part 1. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
This is Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, helping you heal your family legacy. Welcome back and get ready for holidays. I've been talking about resilience and what that is, and I gave you some suggestions about how you can build your own resilience. You know, there's some basic premises that go along with that. I remember when I was in my doctoral program and I was working on my the subject for my dissertation. And, you know, I did this big, like, here it is. This is going to be the thing. You know, like most doctoral students, it's my life's work. I was all ready. I went in. I gave it to my committee. They looked it over and said, you know, you got to redo this. You're starting with a whole bunch of assumptions that aren't really proven, that aren't really real. And wow, that took me by surprise. But, you know, I really dug into that. Like, what kind of assumptions am I making on a daily basis? And, you know, I wanted to kind of finish off this resilience thing with that kind of thinking. So follow me if you can. See if I can. And that is that one of the problems that I have noticed when it comes to building resilience, having resilience, is based on the false assumptions that we all have. Okay? So you might have an assumption that if you, say, work hard in your life, and you know, like save your money or whatever, it's like you have these assumptions. If I work hard in my life, I'm going to get ahead and I'll be able to, you know, fulfill all my dreams if I do that. And so that idea that if I do this, this will happen is based on an assumption that is not based in reality. I have talked before about how we can make the best plans ever, but we don't know how it's going to turn out. We don't know what the consequences or the results of our behavior will be. Okay, so I worked hard all my life. You know, the fact of the matter is that I've been working since I was about 3 years old. And I'll be 72 pretty soon, so that's a long haul, okay? And, you know, when I said I started working at 3, we had a big family farm, okay? And everybody that could walk was working on that farm. Now, I didn't hoe weeds until I was a little older, but, you know, I was out there planting with them because it was easy, especially the potato part. I'm just going to go off on this little thing. On the planting potatoes on a big farm goes like this. My grandfather's driving the tractor, and he has this hoe thing, this digger hoe thing on the back of the tractor that when he goes, it makes this little trench that's about maybe 12 inches, 18 inches deep. And it goes, you know, down the line. He turns around, comes back, goes down the line. And we're all behind him in our little trenches, okay, just pushing a potato seed into the side of the trench. a 3-year-old could do this. And I did. Up and down the trenches. Okay. And we're talking acres and acres. And then if you plant the tomato plants, somebody goes and, digs a little teeny hole. You place it in the hole and they cover it up. That's how you plant potato plants. Now, this was when I was young, so, might be different now. When you plant corn, you just take a little handful of corn and you throw it in the hole. And then somebody covers it up. I could do that when I was 3. So when I say I've been working since I was 3 years old, I'm really not being hyperbolic about that. It's a true story. And, even when I learned how to drive when I was 7, I learned how to drive a truck that could haul hay. And because I was the only one there, my father, who was baling hay. And so he would line up the truck where he had to go to pick up that hay. And then he'd place me on, it's a big old truck. He'd put it in what he called compound gear, put me in the driver's seat, and say, now just hold that going down the road. Just hold that. And most of the time I did pretty good, man. I was, kneeling on that. I was kneeling there, holding on to that steering wheel as hard as I could, and just holding it steady. So I went from one, and then when we get to the end, he'd jump into the truck, I'd jump over, he'd turn the wheel, and we'd go back the other way. And so, after a while, I could do that on my own. He didn't need to jump in because I knew how to do it. And pretty soon, I was driving the truck and then driving the car. And I was 7, 8 years old. That wasn't unusual and probably still isn't for farm kids. Okay? So, when I say that I worked from the time I was 3 years old, I'm not kidding. I'm not being hyperbolic. I also went to school. I did fairly well in school, obviously. And so when I say that I thought if I worked hard, that I would be able to make some of my dreams come true. That in fact, I'd be able to make all my dreams come true. At one point in my life, when I was quite young, I had this idea that I would work hard enough in my life that I could have my own driver. Because, geez, when you start driving as early as I did, after a while it gets a little boring. Now, I've enjoyed it now that I'm a little older and I don't have to be in traffic all the time. But I never did have a driver. Did I quit working because I couldn't have a driver? No, I did not. Because I'm one of those people who happens to believe that just because I do something, I can't control the outcome. When I got pregnant, I couldn't control the outcome of that pregnancy. I couldn't control whether or not it was going to be easy or hard, or if I was going to have morning sickness, or if the baby would be okay. I didn't know any of that. Now, did I sit around and worry about it? No, I did not. I just, okay, I'm pregnant, going to work. I mean, that's what I did. And I took the best care of myself that I possibly could. I was already doing that before, but I continued to take the best care of myself that I possibly could. I went to whatever appointments I needed to go to. I read about it. I read how, what to expect when you're pregnant, what to expect the first 3 months. I mean, I read it all. I studied it all, and I hoped that everything would be okay, but I knew that I didn't have control over that. I knew that I didn't have control over the outcome. And I think that's one of the reasons that I'm fairly resilient myself, is that even as a young person, I knew that I could try really hard. I could try the hardest thing the hardest way but I couldn't control what would happen. Okay. So when I was at the university, I wanted to be in student government. I'd been in student government in high school. I wanted to be in student government at the university. So I figured out a way to run for office. I didn't know if I'd win, but I worked really hard to try and get people to vote for me. And well, they did. So I was in student government when I was at the university. Then I enjoyed it, and it paid off big time for me. And I learned a lot, and that was really great. Did I think if I run, I'll win? No, I didn't think that at all. In fact, resilient people, what they do is they do the thing. They evaluate, what am I going to do here? And they focus on what they're doing here and now. That's what they focus on. They don't think, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and I've got my eye out there somewhere in the future. That's what if I'm focused on that, I will probably feel really disappointed, because there I am, all thinking about what it's going to be like, how it's going to happen, what's going to happen. And then I get really disappointed, because most of the time, it doesn't turn out the way you think it will. It just doesn't. Resilient people stay focused on the here and now. And they're the ones that bounce back pretty easy, because they're not all overwhelmingly disappointed and thinking that somehow they got cheated, or that somehow things out there, in the world stopped them from getting what they wanted when they started out. So what resilient people do is they focus on what they're doing. They acknowledge and accept outcomes for what they are. And if they don't like it, they don't stand there and throw a hissy fit. They say, well, if I really want to have this or achieve this or whatever, I guess I'm going to have to go back and evaluate what I did wrong, what I did right, what I need to do different. And if I really want that, I'll just try again. Okay? So that's what people who have resilience do. And guess what? They most of the time, don't have a lot of anxiety. If you want to get rid of your anxiety, take your eyes off the future and focus on now. And when I work with people in therapy and they've got anxiety, I say, well, they come in, they go, oh God, I've just got so much anxiety. And I say, well, what are you afraid of then? And they say, well, no, I don't have fear. I have no fear. I just have a lot of anxiety. I can't sleep at night. What are you thinking about when I can't sleep at night? When you can't sleep at night? Well, I'm thinking about what's going to happen at my job. I think about what's going to happen with my marriage. I think, and I say, all of that is about the future. It has nothing to do with getting in bed and sleeping at night. If you want to sleep at night, leave it at the door. Don't bring it to bed with you. In fact, if you can leave it at the door, how about leaving it where it belongs, which is somewhere in the future that you have no control over? Because all fear, except if a fire engine is coming directly at you, all fear is about your perception about what you think is going to happen in the future, over which you have no control. Resilient people know this, and they stop having assumptions about what's going to happen in the future. They just don't. It's like I was hoping that I would live to retire primarily from my primary job. And, I still work. I still see people in my practice. And I'm obviously doing this podcast, and pretty soon I will be coming out with the audio version of my book, Iron Legacy. And so if many of you looked at that book and saw how long it was and all that and said, oh, I'm not going to read this book, it's going to be on audiobook pretty soon. And I'll let you know more about that when I discover with my producer which, where you're going to be able to pick that up. It's all done now, though. So anyway, that resilient part of me said, I was going to be able to retire someday from all this. And I'm still doing some of the things I always did, but I don't do it all the time now. I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't think about it. The only thing I wanted that was really important to me was to be able to spend more time with my son and his wife and my grandson. And I spend quite a bit of time with them. But the most important thing is that I wanted to be in nature more. I didn't want to be in my office more. I wanted to be in nature more. And I have managed to do that, which, I'm eternally grateful for. In fact, the other day when I was hiking and, it had been snowing and it was bitter cold because there was a wind chill and everything where I am. But I was out anyway because guess what? I know how to get warm, put lots of clothes on, put good gloves on, all that kind of stuff. So I was out in nature, it was just beautiful, snowing and blowing, and it was beautiful. And I said to my friend that I was hiking with that day, I said, I've managed to be out in nature about half of the time, maybe more than half of the time that I'm awake. And so maybe when I take my last breath, it'll be here. Wouldn't that be cool? Anyway, but do I think about how that's going to happen? Not really. It just occurred to me that, that's a probability. Cool. So, I'm pretty resilient, and that's what it is. A big part of me, it's like my brain works. My brain still functions. And so, it does think about, I wonder what it'd be like if this happened. I wonder what it'd be like if that happened. But you'll notice that I'm saying, I wonder what would be. Not, I'm going to make this happen. I wonder what it would be like. It's kind of like, that's creativity. And so, I really want you to think about this, because most of the issues that people have, that people come to me with, that are not, that they're really not in crisis, is what their expectations are, what their assumptions are. The expectations about what will happen and the assumptions that I'm basing that on, which, it's like you can't do that. The assumption that if I work really hard, then this expectation that I'm going to get X, Y, or Z will happen. And then I do all that. And most of the time it doesn't happen because we don't have any control over what's going to happen in the future. And then we get all disappointed and depressed and angry and try and blame it on everybody. And we get all crazy with it, maybe drink about it, use drugs about it, whatever. And it's all based on these assumptions and expectations. So how do you do that? You like bring yourself back into the present. Remember I said, find 6 colors. Name them out loud. As you do that, focus on one that you really like in that moment and let yourself just be there for 10 minutes or 10 seconds or whatever. And then you can feel your body and your brain calm down because you've given it something else to do. It's that simple. Don't complicate it. Or walk around wherever you are and notice how your feet fall and notice how it feels on the ground. you're back in the present. And if you're working hard, then go back to work and work hard. And just think about what you're doing, not about what you wish that would accomplish. Now, I have had, dreams. I have had, I wonder what would happen here, or I wonder if I could do this, or I wonder if I could do that. I've had that. I thought, I wonder if I could climb Mount Kilimanjaro. I wonder if I could do that. So I went and tried, and I could. There were people there that could not, and they were angry at themselves and blaming other people. And it's like, come on, you can do it or you can't do it. If you want to really do it and you didn't do it this time, you might go back and say, what went wrong? If this is really important to me, what do I need to do to make this work? So, all that said, and that was a lot, is that keep it in the present. Focus on what you're doing now. Focus on thinking about what you're doing now. And the consequence will follow. Okay? Whether it's a positive thing or whether it's not so positive, the consequence will follow. So when the elections happened, I wasn't glued to the TV because, I was out in nature. But the next morning I looked in to see who won the elections, and there was a guy who was running. I don't even know what he was running for. It was in another state than I live in, so I wasn't that familiar with it. But he said, I gave it my best shot. My opponent won. And in this country, what we do is we concede and say, nice job, and go on our way. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm conceding this election to him because he won. That's what we do. I felt so happy about that when it happened. But that man is a resilient person. He probably had some feelings about it. I mean, if you're running for election, it's rough stuff. Okay? So he probably felt sad and maybe a little bit angry or, whatever. But, my guess is that he wasn't back there trying to create an insurrection. Okay? I felt relieved about that. And I thought, this is how most of us think and feel. Now, if we could just get back down to that, doing it a day at a time, a minute at a time, focusing on what I need to focus on now. I'm a daughter of the Golden West. My family are all Mormons, and I'm actually a descendant of the Mormon pioneers. A direct descendant of the Mormon pioneers. And I've read stories about my ancestors that came across the plains. They weren't thinking about, let's go to Salt Lake City. They weren't. They were running away, going somewhere that they thought that they could just live in peace. And they came across those plains and hand carts and wagons, pregnant women walking through snow. I mean, there were a lot of people who died along the way. But you know what? They kept going anyway. They needed to find a place to be. And so every day they got up and most of them walked. I think that's probably where I get that, by the way. I can walk 15. I've walked 35 miles in one day before. I think that's, anyway. So they got up and they walked. They didn't think about, it's going to be so grand. They didn't know. They didn't know what it was going to be like. They just did it. And that's what you need to do to be a resilient person. Now, I know that Thanksgiving, Christmas, and, the holidays, I love the holidays, but, the holidays are coming up. And so next time we get together, I'm going to talk about how you can use those resilient skills that I hope you're building, because I gave you some really simple ways to do it, how you can tap into your resilience when you're dealing with the holidays. And so get ready, buckle up. Here they come.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Healing Your Family Legacy here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. Healing Your Family Legacy is copyright 2022, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.